There's an old saying that venture capitalists have about first-time CEOs, and it goes like this. It's really simple. We expect you to screw up if you're a first-time CEO. So what's the key for you if you're going to screw up and investors are expecting you to screw up? Well, the key is to make your mistakes small, not big. And there's some mistakes you absolutely positively want to avoid. And there are 12 I'm going to go over. In today's video, I'm going to go over 6. In next week's video, I'll go over the next 6. And there are no particular order that I'm going over this. And there's one particular mistake that you never, ever, ever want to make. And I'm going to go over that next week. But for today, we're going to go over the first 6. So let's go. So hi, I'm Brett. And probably on this list of 12 mistakes that we're going to go over today, actually 6 we're going to go over today. We'll go over the next 6 next week. I don't think I've made all of them there, but I've certainly made some of them. and this is the thing, right? When you're starting out, you don't really know what to do. You're going to make mistakes. So let's go over these because I'm going to tell you what these mistakes are. I'm going to tell you how to avoid them. And if you've gotten into these mistakes, how to get out of these mistakes. So let's get started with the first mistake on our list today. And that mistake is choosing to solve problems you don't care about. Now, why is this important? Well, think about your life as a startup CEO and think about how challenging it is to build a company and build a business. Now, maybe you don't know this yet, but you soon will, and your mettle is going to get tested. So what would you rather be working on? Something you care about or something you don't care about? Well, the key is to focus on things that you care about, because if you care about them, that's what's going to sustain you during the tough times. Now, having said this, let's say you're focused on a business where you really don't care about what you're doing. Does this mean you should switch what you're doing? Maybe, maybe not. Because there are a lot of examples of people who have chosen problems that they don't care about. But the reality is, if you care about the problem that you're solving, you're more likely to have success. That's why I want you focused on caring about that problem. It's going to lead you in the right direction. But let's say that you're focused on something you don't care about and you're losing. Well, what should you do? Well, don't give up, but make a concerted effort to find things in the problem that you care about. It may be pivoting. It may be pivoting your customer base. They're great examples of companies that have subtly changed their focus to focus on customers that they care about or focus on an application that they care about. All sorts of things like this. That's what you should do. Now that leads directly into mistake number 2. And that's focusing on customers you don't care about. If you don't care about your customers, you're not going to give them that A level of support that they need to buy from you. And let's be honest here, one of the big differentiators that you have as a startup is your ability to move fast and provide people with service and support they can't get anywhere else. So if you don't do this and you don't care, you're probably not going to do everything you need to do to win that business, to help customers succeed, to help them get over the hump. You won't stay late that one night. You won't build exactly what they need that one time. You just won't care. So what's the remedy to this one? Well, obviously you can change your focus, like I said in problem number 1, or you can find things, dig deep here, and find things that you actually care about that your customers are doing. And if you truly don't, and you truly just say, you know what, I cannot stand what my customers are doing, find something else to do. Make some adjustments in your focus, because in all likelihood, you're not going to be successful. Okay, let's move on to number 3. And this one is near and dear to my heart. Choosing the wrong co-founders. Now, why is this near and dear to my heart? Well, because I did this, not knowingly, but I did this. I had the wrong co-founders in my first iteration of my company, and I paid for it. My co-founders walked out the door. They stole the IP to the company, right down to the slide deck, and essentially started the exact same business that I was starting. Now, I ended up prevailing, and they ended up failing, but it was just by the slightest of margins that this happened. I got lucky. Maybe, maybe not, but I persevered and I got a little bit lucky and I made it through. So what are the things you need to do to make sure you're choosing the right co-founders? Well, let's go over them. Well, first of all, make sure there's a match between you and your co-founders. In other words, make sure your values match. Make sure your co-founders have integrity. Make sure your co-founders bleed and believe just like you do and are just as fanatical as you are about the mission of the company. And make sure you work well together. Now, does that come in a day? No. Does that come in a week? No. Does that come in a month? No, it really doesn't. It takes time. So give yourself time as a team to see whether this works. Now, there's another component of this, which I'm going to get to later, which is really important to protect yourself just in case you have the wrong co-founder. But give yourself some time here. I have what I call the 9-month rule. Maybe that's not realistic. Maybe it's more like the 3-month rule. But give yourself a minimum of at least 3 months to work together as a team before you start really moving forward with the business. You need time to make sure that you and your co-founders are going to gel together, because guess what? Over 50%, you heard me right, 50% of all co-founder relationships fail. Take that to the bank. Now let's go on to number 4, not being transparent with your team. Now, what leads to failing relationships? A lack of transparency, a lack of honesty. Now, why are we afraid to be transparent? What's the reason for this? What could it be? Why? Well, let me give you my thoughts on this. It's because we're afraid. We're afraid if we tell the brutal truth to our team, whomever our team is, that they're just going to go and walk away and say, you know what? I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to work here anymore. There's a problem, whatever it is. And they walk away because you told them the truth. That's your big fear, right? But the reality is something truly different. If you've chosen the right people to work with and they're all in and you're being transparent with them and you've built the right culture for your company, that's a lot of ifs there, but these are all things you need to do, then you know what? If you're transparent, you can tell your team anything and they'll stick around to the bitter end. I've seen this. I've lived this. I went through some crazy things when I was running my company. If you've been following me, I've written about them before, but I was in a year-long fight with one of our investors who backed out and didn't want to support us anymore, pulled their funding, and we had a fight for everything. We were down to nothing. And we got to the point where we had 4 potential investors about 2 to 3 weeks away from giving us term sheets, literally. And one of our investors wanted to pull the plug on the company. And I begged the investor to not do it. And I asked him to give us 6 weeks to go through these 4 investors. We would go to minimum wage was my proposal. I'll put the team on minimum wage, including myself. Everybody goes to minimum wage. Give us that 6 weeks. The investor agreed. The hard part was telling the team, because now you got to tell them, guess what, guys? Instead of making your huge salaries, you're going to $10 an hour. Isn't that fun? Well, we did that. I talked to the team the next day, told them what we were going to do. They asked me questions for over an hour. And at the end of all of this, rather than storming out of the office and being angry, the team actually applauded at the end of our talk. And you know how many people left? I was figuring 10% of our team would walk out. You know how many people we ended up losing? 0. That's the power of being transparent with your team all along. If you're transparent and you operate with integrity and you build a team based on integrity, guess what happens? People dig in when tough times happen. If you're not transparent, then guess what? The first time there are problems, people aren't going to believe you. And if you ask them to help, they're not going to help you. So it really, really pays to be transparent. Transparency wins. Never be afraid of telling your team anything. Never be afraid of revealing what your revenue plan is, how much money you have left, whatever your issues are. Be honest. It will pay off for you in the end. Number 5, not emphasizing your company culture. Now, we just talked about transparency. And transparency and culture are intimately related. Now, why is this so important? Why is culture so important? Well, if you have the right culture, if you have a culture built around transparency, integrity, having a lot of smart people around the table, building a great product, having trust, all these things together, people want to stick around. People want to stay. And if you have the right culture, that's what's called the commitment culture, what I just described to you. If you have that type of culture, people stick around, your company has a much better chance of winning with that commitment culture. That's what you're trying to build. If you choose a different type of culture, for example, you choose the star culture, where everybody is a superstar supposedly, and they're kind of mercenaries, but they have really no commitment, no belief in what you're doing. That culture is less effective than the commitment culture. If you build a top-down culture, a command and control culture, whatever the other cultures are, they're less effective. Get your culture right. Focus on it before you bring on anybody, maybe even before you add a co-founder. Really think about, how do I want this company to operate? What do I look for in my teammates? How do I want them to operate? Because everybody that you add to the culture influences the culture. And guess who sets the culture? That's right, you do. So really think hard about culture, because culture is more important than the market you choose. It's more important than your customers. It's more important than anything that you do. It's more important than your technology. Culture wins. So really focus on it from day one and get it right. So we talked about the importance of culture. Here's the anti. Here's the killer thing you don't want to do. And you have to be really vigilant on this 6th one. This is the last one in today's video. I'll show you number 7 through 12 in next week's video. Here's number 6. Hiring brilliant jerks. Don't do it. We're all tempted to do it. I've been tempted to do it. I've hired some brilliant jerks. And you know what's happened every single time I've hired a brilliant jerk? That's right, they failed. Like clockwork. Brilliant jerks never work out, yet they're oh so tempting. That really smart person with the funky resume who looks like they could save your business. Oh, it's so tempting to bring them on. Then what happens? Every single time they wreak havoc on your business. They don't follow the rules. They don't fit the culture. They end up getting into fights with everybody. And their work, which you're hoping is brilliant to offset all their flaws because they're jerks after all, isn't that brilliant. So who are we kidding here? We're tempted to do it. Don't do it. Now let's say you hire a brilliant jerk. Well, what do? It's obvious what to do. You move them on. Get them out of your company as quickly as you can. You will not regret it. And you know what everybody else in your company will do when this happens? They'll breathe a sigh of relief. In fact, you're going to hear statements like this. What took you so long? Every single time I've either inadvertently or directly hired a brilliant jerk because I thought I had to have him, and then I let him go, every single time somebody came up to me and said something like, what took you so long, Brett? Learn from my mistakes. That's what you want to do. All right, so we've gone through numbers 1 through 6 on my list of 12 things that you want to avoid to build your startup. Next week, we'll go through number 7 through number 12 on my list of 12 killer mistakes that you don't want to make as a startup CEO. Enjoyed speaking with you today. I'm Brett at brettjfox.com. Thanks again.